If you've been suffering from chronic IBS, then it might be time we got to the bottom of it. In today's podcast, we get to learn from Raewyn Guerrero, the Gutsy Executive Coach, here to shine the light on what really causes IBS so that we can address it at its roots instead of putting a Band-Aid over the symptoms. Whether it's IBS-C or IBS-D or a combination of the two you're suffering from, you can find out the underlying hidden cause to target the proper treatment for your IBS symptoms. Our expert guest speaker today is Raewyn Guerrero, the Gutsy Executive Coach. She's the former head of wellness for a global bank turned functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, CBT hypnotherapist, best-selling author, and speaker. After years chasing IBS and anxiety in the conventional medical model, she's created freedom in her life by focusing on gut health as the first wealth. Because when you get the body right, the brain follows. Now she guides high-performing women from fatigue and overwhelm to clarity and energy so that they can create the personal and professional impact they were meant for. Welcome, Raewyn. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm super excited for the audience because what we're going to learn today is the underlying causes of IBS, top reasons for IBS, and what causes IBS. So welcome, Raewyn, the Gutsy Executive Coach. Thank you so much for joining us and volunteering this time to share your knowledge, your expertise, and your experience really with IBS.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to your audience.
Yay. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being here. So can you start off with telling maybe some about your experience actually with IBS, your run-in with IBS?
It wasn't just a run-in, it was like a kind of lifelong ongoing thing that really got exacerbated by the time I was 31 and I had been on 15 courses of antibiotics in the year 2010. And by 2011, I had a diagnosis of IBS. And the gastroenterologist who saw me, she did her scans and her tests and she said, well, there's nothing really wrong with you. It must be in your head. It's just IBS. Maybe you could cut out eating sugar or maybe just eat like brown rice. And she didn't really give me any guidance on what it was about. And it was just like, well, you're going to have to live with it. She wanted to give me some proton pump inhibitors. And I didn't want to be on any more medication because from everything that I'd learned, it was like, well, the medications had kind of contributed to the fact that my gut, I was not absorbing food. So I oscillated between IBS-D and IBS-C. So I had a mixed version of that. And with everything that I've learned since then, it was actually, I did some other labs. I decided to go down the functional medicine route, which was completely different to the traditional Western model, which was like, well, you got a diagnosis, get stuck with it for the rest of your life, and probably multiple diagnoses because of the medications that we put you on, because they all have side effects as well. And I'm like, this doesn't really look like a promising future for me. And I was I think I was 32. At the time, I was like, I'm 32 years old. Like, I don't want to live like this, chained to my bathroom, unable to get into work at a sensible time. This was back before people could work from home. So, 2011, everybody was still going into the office. I was living in central London. I had a really high pressure job, a fun job. I was head of health and well-being for Barclays investment bank. And I really loved what I was doing. So when she said, oh, this is all stress related, I didn't buy it. I thought, well, you know what? I'm actually a trained hypnotherapist. I meditate daily. My stress level, I'm doing work that I find enjoyable and purposeful. So, and I eat what I thought was healthy. And I'm going to talk about that, like what is actually healthy, because we all think that what we're eating is healthy. I was doing, low fat yogurt, skinny blueberry muffins for breakfast. And I was having black coffee because we were like, well, that's what you do to stay healthy. You have skinny everything, black coffee with no cream, no sugar, whatever. And realizing like, wait a second, like I'm not feeling good at all. Like my stomach's really unhappy. It would take me sometimes days before I could go to the bathroom. And then when I did, it was very uncomfortable, painful, cold sweating, the whole works. So I decided to go down a different path. In fact, I tried multiple paths, to be very honest with you, before functional medicine found me. I tried Reiki, acupuncture, even, like I said, hypnotherapy, because I was doing that on myself. And Chinese medicine, like I remember drinking all of these disgusting concoctions all these herbs. And it really, I was like, well, none of this is really getting to why I feel so unwell. And, my God basically brought someone right in my path, because I was running a well-being program, and I decided to do a talk. I brought in a nutritionist, a functional nutritionist, to talk about children's health and their guts and what can impact that and their immunity and keeping them free from colds and flus and eczema and all this cool stuff. And when she started listing off like all the side effects of what antibiotics can do to the gut, it was literally like all the light bulbs went on for me. I was like, wait a second, like I have all of those things, like the flaky skin, obviously the bloating after eating, not going to the bathroom, migraines, headaches, like all. And then of course, I'm a cycling female at 32. And she talked about like when your kids get to a certain point, they might have irregular periods because of the fact that their guts are not happy, and because of the exposure to certain medications that can cause that, even Tylenol and ibuprofen. So for me, it was like, wow, I've been living on, 1,600 milligrams of Motrin since I was 14, right? So in addition to the antibiotics, like since I was 14, I was basically destroying my liver and my gut by being on these medications. And, because obviously I'm in pain, so I'm taking them, and that's all that your doctor knows to tell you. It's like, well, you've got pain, take Motrin. And I think back then it was called something else. I can't remember the name of it. It was like a special combination for women. And it was just eye-opening having this woman come in and talk about all these things that are being caused, or the gut's influencing, like all these symptoms that nobody else was connecting the dots on. So I decided to go down that route, and I needed to figure out like, well, why do I have all of these symptoms and what's actually driving it? And, going down the nutritionist route, they like doing stool testing, and it's different stool testing to what the doctor would run. It's kind of messy, but it was so enlightening, like being able to do that culture. It was a comprehensive parasitology test. And I'll never forget it, because it was the first time I'd ever done anything like that. When I sent it back to the labs, and within like 7 or 10 days, I got answers. It was like I had a candida infection. I had something called Pseudomonas. These are all gut bugs, right? These are all the things that exist within your gut. And the thing about our guts is that we don't understand, like we are actually 57% more non-human DNA than we are human, because we have over 100 trillion bacteria living within our digestive tracts. So that's influencing our mood, the way that we break down nutrients, the way that we assimilate nutrients, the way that hormones are produced. So that's why gut problems and hormones and mood issues tend to go hand in hand. So usually a lot of people who got issues with their gut tend to have problems with anxiety, which was part of my picture as well. And I just thought, oh, everybody in my family's got anxiety. That's just the way that it is. And there is a very small genetic component for sure, but it totally becomes more exacerbated by when you do not have the right balance of good bugs versus bad bugs. And I hope I realize like I'm going on, and I'm going to maybe just pause for a moment to give your audience a chance to absorb all of that, because like the gut, the mood, the hormones, like they all are linked, and antibiotics has something to do with it. And you're more non-human DNA than you are human DNA. That's a lot to take in. And
there's so many causes. That's why we're here today, is to really talk about like what are the common causes and what can we do about it, right?
Yeah. So
find out what
what can you find out? So, well, one of the other things that I did discover along the way after going through my own healing protocols, and then, and I went through several nutritionists, just to be clear as well, because the first one, it was sort of like, well, here's your supplements and off you go. And I didn't really like that either, because this was all very new to me. I had to change the way that I ate. Before I told you I was living on black coffee and pastries or whatever, cake basically for breakfast, and not realizing like, okay, he's wanting me to like stop eating that. And there was no one to kind of guide me through like, well, what would you eat for breakfast if you're not having cereal or a muffin or a croissant or, granola bar? Like what is a breakfast food? Because I didn't have time back then to stand up and make eggs in the morning, because I had had to get into work at a certain time, and I gave myself an hour in the morning to get ready, get out the door. And that in itself was actually a stress because I had this unpredictable bowel habit. It didn't always fit within the confines of my hour. So sometimes I'd be like perfectly dressed, ready to go. And then I was like, oh no, I got to go to the bathroom again. So, but, you're nodding, like, what this is like, right? Like, and I'm pretty sure people listening can relate to this. It's like, I can't really say like, oh, I've got an hour to get out the door. Like, it might be an hour and a half. It might be 2. Who knows? I might get on the train and then I'm like, oh no, my stomach's really not cooperating with me right now. I might need to get off the train. So there was so much anxiety about getting into work and having to commute and being in a big city like London as well, where you've got like 8 million people cramming into the train between 7 and 9 a.m. That's a stress. So stress definitely contributes to IBS, but there's a reason why. And it's to do with the fact that certain gut bacteria actually regulate those stressors. And if you do not have the right balance of that due to, let's say, antibiotics or proton pump inhibitor, anti-inflammatory, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or Tylenol, some other things, I think even Lexapro, some anti-anxiety meds, they can really destroy the ecosystem within your digestive tract. So if you've been on these things for years, on psychopharmaceuticals or normal pharmaceuticals for years, even over-the-counter ones, they can really impact the way that you absorb nutrients and how that's converted into things like your serotonin and neurotransmitters and how you sleep and what your mood's like, and also the way that your thyroid converts hormones. So I recently have a very happy story, actually. I had a little boy, his mother's a biology teacher, and her son was 14 years old and experiencing a ton of anxiety, lethargy. He wouldn't get off his couch. He was a 14-year-old who just wanted to lie down and he felt sick all the time. And his doctors tested his thyroid and they were like, oh, you've got Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid illness. And she came to me because she found me through a Facebook group, and she just said, look, what you're talking about makes so much more sense than what the doctors are saying. Like, how can my 14-year-old son have an autoimmune condition that's really something that happens to women a lot later in their lives? So I said, well, let's just run my labs and see what shakes out. So we did the lab work with him and, found he had like 3 parasites and a bunch of other dysbiotic factors. And dysbiosis means imbalances, right? So he didn't have enough good bugs. He had all this pathogenic stuff going on. And it took us about 6 months, but we reversed that. Like that, actually, he did not have to be on his levothyroxine anymore. And his antibodies went down. They completely, despite his endocrinologist telling her that they'll never go down and he'll have to be on medication for the rest of his life. And, he had gut problems too. He wasn't pooping properly, all that kind of stuff as well. So there was also that, like he was not eliminating well. So by the time we were done, he was pooping every day, a couple times a day, nice, beautifully formed poops. His anxiety disappeared. He was riding his bike. He got a girlfriend. He went to the prom. He wasn't just lying on his couch, listless. And he became a happy, normal 15. By the time we were done, he was 15-year-old. And she wrote a review for me recently because it's been about 6 months since I've seen them. And she wanted to wait. She said, I'll give you a review once I see that even after we're done, like he can maintain this level of energy and happiness and all that stuff. And the fact that they go back and they do repeat blood work with the endocrinologist and the antibodies are gone. So your thyroid hormone has a lot to do, your gut has a lot to do with the production of your thyroid hormone as well. So I wanted to say all of that so that people understand that, the gut is a key player in the way that the body actually converts and metabolizes nutrients, hormones, neurotransmitters, how the liver is working as well. That's also very, very important. So for IBS people, it's never just IBS in my experience. There's always a bunch of other things that are leading up to it. And for me, what I should have picked up on my own clues were, I was like, well, I became lactose intolerant when I was 18, right? And I think I just told you, I said I was on a ton of painkillers, from 14 to whenever for years. And that would have done some damage to my gut. And that makes a lot of sense to me now in retrospect. I was like, oh, well, no wonder I had so many problems with my gut because I had done all this damage to it. And that's why I had problems with my period. And that's why I had problems later on. I ended up having a thyroid nodule. It was benign, but it was still something that was growing, a goiter. And I ended up being intolerant to a lot of foods. And that's also a clue. Like when you're like, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I got to avoid this. And a lot of people remove foods thinking that that's going to be the solution. And I want to let them know right now, like that's only one part of the solution, right? Removing gluten, removing dairy, removing sugar. That's the first step. But there are so many other, that's the elimination phase. But there are about 5 other phases that you've got to go through in order to be able to heal your gut, which is what I teach people how to do in my practice. And it's not something that you do in one session, which was unfortunately the model that the first nutritionist I went to. He was like, okay, here's your probiotics, here's your antimicrobial herbs or whatever to take, like in capsule form. He's like, take those, see you whenever, good luck. And when I actually started having really bad reactions to some of those antimicrobial herbs, the supplements, he couldn't understand it. He said, oh, that's really weird. Like, I don't understand why you'd be having that kind of reaction. And we call this a Herxheimer reaction or Herxheimer reaction or healing crisis. Because I hadn't been going to the bathroom regularly, trying to bomb and eliminate bugs or do what you call a pathogen eradication phase. That's the next phase. You got the elimination phase. You got to eliminate certain foods and you got to go to pathogen eradication. When you get to that phase, if your detox pathways aren't open, and in my case, they were totally closed because, like I said, I was going to the bathroom like once every 3 days. You can't just start with trying to eradicate bugs, because what will happen is as you start to do that, they start to kick up a stink. They get really pissed off about the fact you're trying to get rid of them, and it can make you feel really unwell. So the way that I work with clients now is that, yes, we start eliminating food, but then we also make sure we go in. So we remove, right? We remove the foods. That's first R. It's like 6 or 7 R's. So remove the foods that are causing problems. Then we get into opening up the drainage. So we make sure that drainage pathways are open. There are certain things that you can do for that. Castor oil packs is one of the things I like to do, but I don't always start everybody there. It depends. It's on a case-by-case basis. Like I have to look at the labs to see what I find. And then, if you do castor oil, you can do lymphatic drainage stuff like dry brushing every morning to get your lymph flowing in order to get your detox pathways working. Rebounding is one of the things that I encourage people to do. If you've got the energy to do it, jump on a trampoline for 10 minutes in the morning, get your lymph again flowing. If you have the energy, again, this is case by case basis. Some of the other things, there are certain supplements that can help open drainage as well. So we get people to get onto those for about 4 weeks before we get into pathogen eradication. So, and then once we do that, you do that for about 60 to 90 days, depending on what it is. If it's like certain parasites need at least 90 days of being bombed if you don't go down the antibiotic route. And I always give people the option. I say, look, we found whatever. Probably need to take this to your doctor, your primary care, let him know that these things have been detected, like certain parasites or whatever have been detected. H. pylori is one, and blastocystis hominis is another one. Those are 2 that I always send people straight to their doctors for, because they're packs. They're like antibiotic packs that you can go on. However, because of my own personal experience with antibiotics, I give people the option. I say, look, do you want to go down the antibiotic route or do you want to do the natural route? Because in any case, even if you did go down the antibiotic route, we would still do a mop up with the natural route. So you might as well just do the 90 days doing what we do, with the botanicals and the herbs and those kinds of things, the plants. So, and using enzymes and probiotics and other cool things to rebalance.
Yeah, I have a question. So the lab work that you've done, has any results come back where there's no pathogens or where the pathogens are not really harmful?
We all have good bugs. I've never actually seen a perfect GI map. Sometimes what I've seen is people with low digestive enzymes, or they've got a damaged gut, like a leaky, they've got like a marker for something called zonulin, which tells you if the gut is leaky or not. So they might have elevated zonulin, or they might have low pancreatic enzymes. Those are reasons why you can't break food down either. And then in that case, it tells me I need to look at the gallbladder and the liver, or if you don't have the pancreatic enzymes, which is why I never run just one test. I run all the tests all at once, because then I get a full picture of what's going on. And then they all kind of corroborate what I'm seeing based on each other, right? So I'll run like 5 or 6 different labs at the same time, and I'll get used. So there'll be a stool sample, there'll be a dried urine sample, there'll be a finger stick blood test. There will be a food sensitivity test, which is the only actual blood draw that I get people to do. And all of these, by the way, they're sent to your house. So you never have to physically go anywhere, and you can get a mobile phlebotomist to come and do the blood draw for you. So they're not very expensive. They charge like sometimes like $45 to come out and do your blood for you to your house. And they'll send it back to the lab and everything for you too, because the labs always send you with like a FedEx or a UPS envelope. And the phlebotomist usually has like, she usually has like a little freezer, a cooler, and she'll put everything in there and then get it sent off like immediately for you. So you don't even have to really do very much apart from book the appointment, give your arm. The stool test and the saliva and the urine, that requires you to just book out maybe a Monday morning and be like, okay, first urine of the day, I gotta catch that sample. Poop of the day, I gotta catch that, provided you can predict when you're pooping. You get those samples, and then same thing, UPS, FedEx. You would just go and drop it off at your nearest location, or you can arrange for them to collect it for you too. So there's lots of options for doing this very easily, painlessly, mostly, at your convenience in your house. It goes off, and in 2 weeks you get the results. And then we have what we call a results and recommendations session. And that's about 1.5 to 2 hours, because it's a lot of lab work. And I record those so that you can go back and digest it, for want of a better expression, digest everything that you have learned. And then the work actually begins, where we meet regularly after that. We meet like once every 2 weeks for an hour and help you implement the different phases. Because remember, I was saying there's like elimination, the remove phase, then the release phase, then the pathogen eradication phase, and then 3 more phases after that with like re-inoculating with good bugs, repairing the lining of the gut if it's found damaged, and rebalancing the flora as well. So there's a lot to it. And a lot of people think, well, I've already eliminated a lot of foods, I'm taking probiotics. I'm like, that's such a tiny piece of this huge puzzle that needs to be addressed. And I realize it's daunting, and that's why it took me about 7 years to put together what I put together. Now, 7 years of my own healing journey, combined with training and learning and education and up-leveling my skills and experience, in order to be able to put it together in a way that it's 3 months as opposed to 3 to 6 months, as opposed to 7 years, condensing down that timeline into something that actually, people can say like, I can devote 3 months of my life to working on getting rid of something that's been bugging me for 5 years or 10 years.
No pun intended.
I do that a lot. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. So
like digesting, bugging.
Yeah. I am curious. The cases that you've worked with, have there been like a larger case of IBS-C constipation versus IBS diarrhea versus combination?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I have seen a lot of SIBO cases too, but there's usually that combination. Most women, believe it or not, tend to be constipated. And I've seen a lot of reasons for that too. Like, so once we uncover like what the bugs are, very often there is a trauma attached to that, some sort of triggering event. Mm-hmm. And because I have like that background in CBT and hypnosis, it's good because it helps me to be able to navigate those waters when we cross them. Yeah. Because what I do see is, I've had clients who've been abused, date raped, all sorts of awful things that have triggered like very soon after, like, oh, I can't go to the bathroom anymore. And then there's a change in their flora. So trauma definitely impacts what's going on with your gut microbes. Mm-hmm.
So have you seen like more cases of one versus the other? Or?
Yeah, constipation tends to be more of the thing that I've seen. Yeah, to be honest, I've seen a lot more constipation than I've seen diarrhea. Diarrhea, I've noticed, tends to happen in very acute cases. Somebody just came back from Mexico and they've got like, they pick something up immediately, or India or whatever, right? But like the chronic long-term, so that's like an acute case, but like chronic long-term stuff, it tends to be more like constipation.
Is it often parasites, or like, are there other causes?
There are potentially other causes. I don't want to freak people out, but even living in a moldy house can be a reason for this, because mold can impact your gut microbiome as well, and candida and mold tend to go hand in hand. So if you show up with candida, and it was weird because now that I look back on my healing journey, I had lived in a basement apartment in central London for like 2 years, and I had candida right around the same time. So I'm like, well, no wonder. But, back then that nutritionist, he only ran one test. And this is why I'm like, I like to run all the tests. I will do the urine test to find out if there is mold as well, because he didn't connect the dots. He's just like, oh, well, let's just do a stool test. You're having trouble with your gut. And my, what I would want everybody to repeat over and over, the symptom is not the problem. It is the result of the problem. So usually you have to look further upstream. And even in the case of parasites very often show up when there is a presence of heavy metals, and heavy metals meaning aluminum, mercury, right? So if you've got mercury, arsenic, if you're eating a lot of rice, if it's not organic, all those kinds of things, arsenic can show up. A lot of vegans tend to have very high levels of heavy metals. And they're very, because they eat a lot of rice and peas, rice and beans, that's their staple for getting their protein. And they tend to have very elevated levels of arsenic and other heavy metals, thallium, because they eat a lot of kale. Kale stores thallium. It causes the body to hold on to it. So vegans tend to have a lot more problems than other people, believe it or not.
The gums, right? They put so much gums in like the gluten. Well, actually, that's the gluten.
The gums, and just even like the fact that the produce that they're eating, and like I said, the rice in particular, they're eating a lot of grains that contain heavy metals and glyphosates and other pesticides and stuff that is actually very glyphosates very, very damaging to the gut. Parasites exist sometimes, not sometimes, very often. In fact, almost every single time they exist because there is a heavy metal problem. So killing off the parasites is never enough. You've got to, because they'll keep coming back, because what they do, they're there to sort of like absorb the byproducts, sorry, because it's not nutrients, it's the byproducts of the heavy metals. And H. pylori is not a parasite, but it's a bacterial pathogen, and it loves iron. It sucks up B vitamins and iron. So people who tend to be low in B vitamins, supplementing with B vitamins is not enough, because what if it's something that's sucking up your B vitamins, right? And you haven't dealt with it. And if you supplementing with iron in the same vein, like, oh, you've got low iron. Why have you got low iron? You don't just go and supplement with the thing that you're low in, because there might be an underlying driver behind that. And that's why it's really important to work with somebody who understands that, because when you go to your traditional doctor, they're like, oh yeah, your iron is low. Let's give you an iron supplement. And we're like, well, what if I don't actually need that and I need to kill off the thing that's sucking up the iron?
Yeah.
H. pylori exists in 75% of the population, just to let everybody know. And it's responsible for ulcers. It's responsible for certain cancers. Usually, a lot of gastrointestinal cancers are down to H. pylori. So there's two types of it too. There's the virulent kind, and then there's a non-virulent kind. So a lot of people can live with it and it not be a problem. But then there are people where it is a problem, where you've got GERD, reflux, you've got bloating after you eat, you are constipated. That's one. Those are some of like the three big signs. Maybe you're getting bloody stool, like it's already, escalated to the point where your stool is bloody. These are signs that, okay, something is up and you need to investigate what's causing it, rather than just taking an immune suppressant, which is generally, unfortunately, what the standard kind of medical model will give you. They'll say, oh, you've got an immune condition like ulcerative colitis. Let's just put you on an an immune suppressant. Which
kicks off a domino effect of even worse symptoms.
So much worse. And the omeprazole, particularly bad. The other one that people take for GERD or for reflux. So those are certain things that, you would want to be mindful of. Like, yes, is it always parasites? No, it's not always parasites. There are other factors that are even making your environment, making your body a host for parasites. So what you want to do is back all the way up, like go all the way upstream and look at like, well, why is my body a host for this thing? Why? Because very often you see people get stuck in that cycle of like, well, I already did a gut protocol. I already did parasite removal. I already did, removing the gluten and I was like, well, but you're still having problems. So that tells me that there's something much deeper going on that we need to go and check out. If you're willing, let's go do it. Let's do all the tests. Let's see if there are currently parasites, so you could work on removing those too. But if there is, like, let's say a stressor in dental work is usually one of the bigger stressors when it comes to heavy metals, right? So mercury in your mouth in the form of amalgam. What other things are there? Crowns, root canals. Yeah. So amalgam, fillings, root canals, crowns, dental, titanium implant. These things that people are doing to themselves and not realizing, like if you've ever been in a car accident and you have, let's say, a metal, a steel plate in your leg or in your arm or something. These are all clues. These are the things that are making your body a hospitable place for some of these critters.
So the difference in your approach is really you look at the root cause versus a lot of medical doctors nowadays. They just address the symptoms and they're adding, which aggravates some of the symptoms.
Yeah, and you might find relief initially, but what ends up happening in the long term is that the pharmaceuticals will have side effects, right? There will be side effects that come along with them. So I want to minimize that. And, the problem with side effects is that you end up on more and more pharmaceuticals. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but like the average American, by the time they're 44, they're on at least like 5 medications.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. In their 40s, they're on a ton of medications. So
pharmaceuticals as well.
Yeah. So that's, and the fact that they're on those things, by the time they're in their 60s, they're on several more, and we don't want that because those things do have side effects and they make your life really unbearable at some point. I think the CDC, I was just pulling up some stats here, but the CDC says that 60% of US adults have one chronic illness by the time they're 40. And that's becoming, more and more prevalent. And I think it's 1 in 2 women have got cancer now. And that was even before the COVID vaccines. So I don't even want to know what it's going to look like now. There are a lot of things that are impacted. I'm really anti-drugs, to be honest with you, because I see what it did to me. And also, full disclosure, my grandfather was on anti-anxiety medications for 20 years, just being prescribed, getting repeat scripts over and over and over. And that led to multiple strokes and dementia because it causes the psychopharmaceuticals, they can harden and stiffen the arteries in your brain. Even though as you get older, that happens anyway, but it makes it a lot worse. And then you can have a stroke or an aneurysm. And that's what happened to him. And he ended up with vascular dementia. So I think I am on a crusade in a lot of ways. And I want people to join me in being able to take back. I think the biggest act of rebellion you can commit right now is being a healthy person, like being someone who does not need medications, because I'm in my 40s, I'm 44, and I'm going to be 45 in about 4 months. And when I go to the doctor there, I go for my annual checkup, like pap smears, whatever. And they're like, what meds are you on? Like, nothing. And they're like, why? Like, no, I'm not on anything. I don't need. And like, oh, and your blood pressure is great, and your cholesterol, your triglycerides are great. And like, I'm like, yeah, because I know how to eat. So I know how to eat for myself too. And I think that's the other thing that people are not aware of. They think like I'm eating healthy food, and I know I touched on it at the start, and I'm going to land the plane here with it. When we think that we're eating healthy food, very often the foods that might be healthy for everyone else might not necessarily be healthy for you. And classic example was like I was living on, when I started eating healthily, and giving up the skinny blueberry muffins and the yogurts and all those things. I started eating a lot of broccoli and a lot of Brussels sprouts and cauliflower and having a lot of fish. There's other, bananas and smoothies and mangoes and pears and grapes. And when I did my food sensitivity test, I was intolerant to all of those. So the thing is, the leakier your gut is, so the more porous your gut is, the more intolerant you're going to be to certain foods. Now, that doesn't mean you can't introduce them later on once you do the work on repairing your gut. And that's what I ended up doing. I was like, oh man, like all my favorite foods, like I can't eat the tuna, like even tuna was on my list. I have a friend who his whole life, he's not been able to eat beef. And I did ask him, I said, are you sure you don't have like a parasite? And he's like, no, I've done tests. I don't have any parasites. Anyway, he decided to go on this parasite protocol with a company called Cellcore. I use their protocols, their products. And it took him about 7 weeks, and he ended up getting rid of a very large parasite. And I'm told him, I was like, I bet you're going to be able to eat meat now, because he said when he ate meat, he would just be very uncomfortable, bloated, sometimes even a little bit of like colitis, like bleeding through, rectal bleeding. So I'm looking forward to, because he's still going through the protocol. He's not done yet. So he's still going through it. But I said, I'm looking forward to when we do your retest of the MRT, of the food sensitivity test. I said, I'm looking forward to seeing that beef is no longer on your red list, that it's something that you can tolerate. Because when, the difference between allergies and intolerances is that an allergy is something you are born with, and intolerance is something that you acquire. And it's usually acquired because as you get older, your gut gets leaky, you don't have the right enzymes to break foods down. So, all this to say that, the foods that you think are healthy for you might not be, because they're healthy for somebody else. And the best way to find out is to test and to not guess. And that's how I structure my protocols around doing the food sensitivity testing, so that everybody knows exactly what they should be eating, so it's not causing any extra inflammation than they need to.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, what's just to tie this all together here or make it more practical, what's the next steps, like someone who's experiencing leaky gut or IBS? What can they do?
Well, I just said it, test, don't guess. Like, your first step has always got to be testing. You might already be eliminating foods and realizing, crap, I'm becoming more and more and more intolerant to more foods. And my world is starting to get smaller. Like, I'm not able to eat out anymore. I'm very sensitive to everything. So the first step is to actually test, find out what you're sensitive to, find out what the state of your gut is, find out if there are any other contributing stressors, any other hidden stressors. We want to make the hidden visible. We want to make the invisible visible. So that's what the testing allows you to do. And once you do that, then you're able to see very clearly, like, oh, this is where I need to head, where this is the direction. And it gives us a roadmap. So if people want, I am taking people on until the end of the year, because I want to work with people between now and December and show them, like, in 3 months and even within 6 weeks, you can start feeling really, really good and start tolerating things again and start repairing the damage that might have been done over years. But the one caveat is that I say, like, even if you work with me for 3 to 6 months and you make some progress, you're not going to have to stay seeing me regularly, because the idea is that I've taught you how to empower and look after yourself. I've taught you how to eat for yourself, right? But what you will need to commit to is, like, well, once a year, I'm going to run a gut test. You will need to commit to figuring out where you're at now, because you travel, you're exposed to stressors all the time. Your body's going to change as you're living through it. So it's not like a one and done, like, oh, I go through a protocol and I'm done. Like, no, your life is the protocol. Like, you're going to have to commit to being, to living a certain way, eating a certain way. And it's not to say that you're never going to be able to have, like, cake and ice cream ever again. Like, I do it. I just choose a gluten-free cake. And it's occasional, as opposed to back then, my muffin was every day. My skinny blueberry muffin was an everyday thing. And now it's like, no, I might do that, on the weekend, and I have my 80-20 rule, and I can still enjoy life. And gluten for me is a no-no, because my father is a celiac. Like, I had the genes for celiac disease. Even though it wasn't expressed in me, the labs will help you understand exactly what you should be eating. And you will be able to go back to eating certain things if, occasionally. It's not going to be the thing that you're basically going to learn how to eat for your body, rather than filling it with processed foods or foods that you think are healthy that might not actually be healthy for you. And, retesting regularly to figure out where you're at. So it's a commitment. It's a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle.
Committing to the rebellion of being healthy, like you were saying.
Committing to the rebellion. I like that.
That's what it's a rebellion.
Yeah. Well, I said, like, the biggest act of rebellion people can do right now is actually be healthy and not be stuck in the subscription model of going to the doctor and taking a prescription all the time. Because that's what it is. It's a subscription model. They've got willing participants who are just, and the insurance companies pay, and it's just a moneymaker, really.
Yeah, it's just taking back control of our life,
and exactly, you take back control. You start learning new things. Like, my life has opened up so much since I've been able to shed that old story of being sick, of being sickly, of being always intolerant and can't eat this and can't eat that, and
Our belief system is just so powerful too, right? Just those
completely. But seeing the physical and biochemical changes in myself, it gave me that's why I was like, I can't do this job anymore, like the corporate wellness job. I need to do something that's actually going to really make a dent in people, because no offense to the corporates, like, they've got great ideas, but very often they're not really making the needle. They're not moving the needle at all. A lot of it.
That's really not an objective they have.
No, the objective is, where it's just like, well, let's do what looks good. Like, let's do the thing that looks good rather than the thing that's actually good for helping their people stay well. So I was like, I need to get out of this and I need to be able to actually do this stuff with other people. So, I did functional medicine coaching to start off with. So I learned, and it was just, to be honest, it was an adjunct to what I'd already learned through CBT. Like it was, positive psychology, motivational inquiry and interviewing, so, and that was great learning about character strengths and a lot of stuff that you would use in HR anyway. And that was where I'd come from. So it was a nice segue into the functional medicine world because it kind of integrated stuff that I already knew, but had like a functional medicine lens on it because of the nutrition piece and learning about food plans and all that cool stuff. And then I retrained and did functional diagnostic nutrition to become a practitioner. So I could, under medical supervision, order labs. We have like what we call a medical director program. So there are about 5,000 functional diagnostic nutrition practitioners globally. And we are all under oversight of what we call a medical director program so that we are able to order lab work for our clients so that they can self-treat. So because unfortunately the labs don't go direct to consumer, and the ones that do, there are some that do, they're not very good. Like their reporting isn't good, their detection isn't great. So using the ones that are direct to practitioner, way better. And that's what I give clients access to, that I facilitate or I broker that agreement between a professional medical grade lab with them and then help them understand the results so that they can self-treat and become the CEOs of their health. And the CEO stands for, in my case, it's clarity. You're embodying the plan. So you're getting clarity with the labs and you're embodying the plan, and then you're taking ownership of your life.
Perfect. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I do have another question because I want to tie back into what you mentioned, Hashimoto.
It's a diagnosis that people receive. It's an autoimmune condition for the thyroid.
Okay. And you're able to tie that back to the gut just by running the tests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same with like multiple sclerosis or other things that
other things that I've seen. Yeah.
What are
I can tie it back to the gut totally. Very often even anxiety, ADD, dementia, blood sugar regulation is a huge part of all this stuff too. And if the gut, there's certain gut bugs, if they're not in abundance, like good bugs, if they're not in abundance, your blood sugar is not regulated. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of stuff, I think I actually wrote a blog about this yesterday about akkermansia, which is, responsible for metabolic health, and it is a good bacteria, and very often people who struggle with losing weight don't have any of it. Now the trouble is there are companies out there that are exploiting this, that are creating akkermansia supplements, and like you can't just spot treat like one gut bug, like you got to make sure they're all working together. So I don't like always telling people like, oh yeah, if you've got a low this or a low that, they're like, okay, I'm going to go get a probiotic, or I'm going to get a thing that does exactly that. Same thing like with the iron, like you got low iron, they go out and get iron. I'm like, no, don't do that. We got to figure out why.
It's similar to like antibiotics, right? Because they just prescribe one and they don't even test for what bacteria it is that they're trying to fight off. Right? Yeah.
Well, they're broad spectrum antibiotics. So there, some that are known for, like metronidazole is known for certain parasites. It can get rid of those.
The gut biome too, and
completely, completely. It destroys everything. It nukes. I tell people it's like using a nuclear bomb to kill a cockroach.
Wow, that is the perfect analogy.
Yeah, and you don't need to, and you nuke everything just to get the cockroach, but you kill yourself, you kill the plant life, you kill everything else all around you.
Wow. So when people work with you, would that be like a one-on-one or capacity, or is it, well, of course.
There are different options depending on what someone needs, and I try to match people to that. So there is a one-on-one option. There's also a group option where they probably don't need as many labs and they just want some guidance on like clarity on what is really happening with me, and can I just optimize as opposed to having to have my hand held through the entire thing, like someone who's really
but it's so important to find the underlying cause, right? So the labs.
Yeah. The labs are always included. I don't do anything without labs.
Like you said fewer labs versus like, don't we want a comprehensive number of labs?
Yeah, we totally do. Yeah, but sometimes people are like, well, I just need more energy, and I don't really have a ton of symptoms. So I'll say, okay, well, things like your minerals. Let's just look at what your minerals are doing and see if there's a heavy metal present, because then that will tell me like, do I need to do more testing? So you can start off with like a couple as opposed to like 6. because there's a cost, obviously, too. That's the other thing, it's cost prohibitive. So, I like working with executives because they don't have the same restrictions as other people. But I do have something for everyone in that sense, because there is a self-paced version of this where you can do a couple of labs yourself. And if you are very conscientious and committed to doing it, it's not in the thousands the way that the one-on-one 4 to 6 month is. So there's the different options, and I can be flexible with depending on what certain people need as well.
Okay, wonderful. So could you tell us how people can start working with you, how they can reach out and start working with you?
Yeah, well, I think what I'd love to do is gift your users a download about the lab so that they can become acquainted with what they are. I talked about a couple of them, but this would probably give them some more color. So I would love if everybody downloaded gutsydownload.com. So very simple, really simple, gutsydownload.com. And that will give you, I call it the CEO pathway. It's how to become the CEO of your health. And it will outline the labs and what they are and what's required. And then also like what it would be like to work one-on-one, like what that roadmap looks like, what happens at the start, what happens in the middle, what happens at the end, so it will give you a very comprehensive overview of the way that I like to work and help people if they decided to work with me one-on-one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for leading the rebellion for us to reclaim our ownership of our health, right?
It's so important because there's so many people trying to take it away from us, take away our sovereignty. And, it's our God-given, it's our birthright. Your own body is your birthright. So
it's our life, really, that we need to take back control of.
Yes. So I appreciate you for doing what you do and for giving me a chance to talk to people about this so that I can hopefully ignite a spark within them so that, and they know that there's hope and that they don't have to struggle and they don't have to suffer. Because, 13 years ago, I just remember being doubled over on my bathroom floor, not being able to do very much with my life. And now, I'm left London. I've lived in Mexico. I went to California. I've traveled the whole world. I've been able to do what I do from my laptop and help hundreds of people that way, all while I'm enjoying perfect, beautiful health as well.
Yes, and congratulations for that. I'm so glad you were able to resolve it on your own, because you had to on your own.
You have to, because nobody else is really coming to your rescue. They're just really quick to get you out of their office. They're like, oh, go away.
Yeah, we have to be the hero of our own story.
And I want to help I want to help your clients and your audience become the heroes. And I keep saying CEOs, but hero is a good one too, because I like superheroes. And I think we all have a little superhero within us.
Absolutely. We're full of it. Superpowers.
Superpowers for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Raewyn. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.